Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay and this is Oh My Scars, a podcast educating you on the everyday life of living with a disability. Today I have my mom with me again, Tina, and she will be talking to us about what it was like to have me in school and all of the various things that had to be done to make sure that I got a proper education. So, the first thing that I would like to know is what was the reason behind me being in school at 2 years old?
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
It's good to be back. Well, the reasoning behind it was there in your school, there was a class called non-categorical, or non-cat is what we called it. And what it is the parish, we live in Louisiana, so we have parishes instead of counties. The parish didn't designate a disabled child in any particular category until they were 6 years old. Whether you were physically handicapped, mentally handicapped, whatever the designation might be, they determined that by the age of 6. So they would put students, it was optional, they would put students in a non-categorical class where various disabilities, it's obviously a preschool, but it's also a learning environment. And from there, they can determine the classes that you can take, that you are best suited to take at a later time. So you started at 2, and it also helps with the socialization. So you thrived in that environment. They have aides in the classroom, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was a long time ago, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were like 3 or 4 aides for less than 12 children. So each aide had like 3 kids or something along those lines. And you were taught everything from how to eat with silverware and stuff like that, to they potty trained in that classroom as well if the parents wanted that. But you learned things like your alphabet and numbers and those kinds of things. So it was a total advantage as far as you were concerned.
So when I went on to kindergarten, I sort of had a leg up in that way.
You definitely did, not only in the academic things, which we would have taught you at home anyway, but with socialization. Because I remember when I was in kindergarten, my first day of school, as soon as I discovered that my mother was going to leave me, I threw up. So it's a traumatizing kind of thing. So by the time you went to kindergarten, there was none of that. Okay, Mom, bye, I'm going to school, and you took school very seriously.
Did I have any issues at 2? It doesn't sound like that might have been something I would have had an issue with, but when I was left at school, and
no, one of the good things as far as you were concerned, one of the really good things was that Daddy's cousin was one of the aides in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so she just kind of cleaved to you, and you were her baby, and you knew her before. Mm-hmm. So that kind of helped. So no, you never had any separation anxieties or anything like that. No.
Okay. I've always been sort of independent when it came to that stuff anyway.
Quite independent, yes.
Now, we have what are called children who go to school who have some sort of disability, whether it's physical or otherwise. They have IEPs,
right,
which stands for Individualized Education Program, and they still have those to this day. I have friends who have children who have IEPs.
Yeah.
Did the IEPs start when I went to non-cat?
Yes.
Okay. And since that sort of education program is different than the regular education program of, like kindergarten, first grade, so on and so forth, how did my IEP differ between non-cat and then when I went on to regular school?
Well, in non-CAT, it was centered more on capability, as far as, are you old enough to learn the alphabet, for instance? Social goals. Does she play well with others? Which you did. Those kinds of things. When you got into later grades, and I think kindergarten probably was pretty much along the same line as non-CAT, but once you got into first grade, then we settled in on, you're there to learn. You know, they have regimented classrooms with spelling and English and, you know, all those kinds of things. So your IEP reflected that. It also, the main thing that concerned me, other than the academic issues, were that you had the fairest atmosphere to learn in. So I fought to get a set of textbooks at home for every year. Every year I fought, and many years I failed to get them, even if I offered to pay for a set of books.
That's crazy.
I know.
Why was that so difficult, you said?
I have no idea why it was so difficult. But I even had gone, at some points I went to the school board and said, you know, these kids need these books at home because it makes it easier for me as the parent. It makes it easier for her not having to drag the books home. Makes it easier for her aide at school so that we don't have to pack up books to bring back and forth and this kind of thing. I never got a sufficient answer, and I was ignored a lot of the time. But the IEPs lay out the education plan for the year. What are your goals? And they put those on the IEP. What are my goals as your parent? What are the expectations of the school and the teacher? You met them every year. You met the goals, you met the expectations, and in many ways you exceeded those because you really love school and you were fully focused on your job as a student. When you got into high school, middle school and high school, in my mind, there's really no differentiation as far as how things were as far as middle school and high school. By the time you hit seventh grade, you know, you're pretty high school minded anyway. And you're changing classes, and you're taking subjects that you weren't familiar with, and you know, all of these kinds of things, and the IEP has to reflect these things.
I think that the only thing that I can recall from my IEP that changed between elementary, middle, and high school was that you know, like I mentioned in the last episode, that by the time I got to my sophomore year, the requirement for me to have a child specific was not on the IEP anymore.
Right.
Now, I do recall at some point that it was a requirement for me to take at least one special education class.
Yes.
To remain in that program.
To remain under the special education umbrella is what they called it. In order to get your bus, which was adapted for wheelchairs, you had to take a special education class. In your case, it was physical education, PE, which was really a blessing. And I think we did touch on that in the last episode. It really was a blessing because I think that you and I both saw abilities in you that we didn't really know were there. You got to participate in the Gumbo Games, which was a all-round sports for special needs kids, and you actually fast walked around a tarmac type track with me holding my breath the entire time, but I had a little pendant that said "Go Lindsay." But it was pretty scary seeing you out there doing that, but you did it. You came in second, which was really great. But yeah.
Okay. So with the school bus, I know that I had the same school bus driver all throughout elementary school and all throughout middle school. He was great. We loved him.
He was terrific.
And then I believe, didn't I have him during the latter half of high school because he got a new school bus or something?
I seem to remember that, yes.
I think that the problem with my friend, because he was still driving to where I went to high school, but the problem was that I got a new scooter or something, and it was too big for his lift because he had an older model.
Right.
And I think he got it updated.
Yes, he bought a new school bus.
Yeah, and then I think that he was my bus driver either in both my junior and senior year or just my senior year. I can't really remember. But I do know that I was at least on his bus in my senior year because we were still in communication with graduation and everything.
Right.
And I remember that he and his wife sent me a present for my high school graduation.
Yes, they did. He was terrific, and he loved you.
Yeah.
He loved all the kids on the bus, but he loved you, and he was outgoing and kind and just overly generous as far as his time and his patience. He was well suited for that job.
Yeah. And then also, I remember being on his bus in high school because there were kids that I went to high school with that rode the bus with me. Mm-hmm. And I know that they were from high school, so that's how I remember that too.
Right.
But then the school bus attendant, she was also really great.
Miss Kathy.
Miss Kathy,
was wonderful.
Yeah, she was great. So yeah, I had good experiences, and I think that I think it was only a couple years that I didn't have him as a school bus driver,
yes, and he was very sad.
Yeah.
When he couldn't drive you anymore, he was very, very sad. He'd call and he'd check up on you and see how you were doing, and then finally he called and said, "Look, I got a new bus. I can come and get Lindsay again." And so that was kind of like go home week. We really loved that he could be a part of your life from the time you were 2 years old until you graduated from high school.
Yeah. So he got to see me grow up.
Yes, he did.
Okay. So I know that we had some issues with a teacher. It from memory and from what you've told me, it doesn't seem like it was an ongoing thing as far as having issues with teachers treating me differently, either positively or negatively, due to me having a different sort of situation than everyone else. But there was one teacher that I would like you to say what happened with that.
Okay. Well, it was an issue when you were quite young, and before you had arm surgery, to where you went in and they gave you a little bit of bend in your right elbow. Again, Lindsay's disability is that she can't bend her arms or her legs. She had several surgeries, and one of the surgeries was to give her right arm, which is her dominant arm, a little bit of bend. And at the point that this incident happened, that surgery hadn't taken place, and you were being fed by one of the aides in the classroom, which whenever Lindsay was in a classroom, she had an aide. And you were being fed, and a person from the parish school board was touring the school that particular day, because Lindsay was fed for breakfast and lunch at school. And the school board person wanted to know why that little girl was being fed when all the other kids in the class were feeding themselves. And rather, the teacher knew quite well Lindsay's circumstances, but instead of telling the school board person what the circumstances were, she said, "I don't know." At which point, the teacher told the aide to stop feeding you in the middle of your meal. When I got to the school that afternoon to take you to physical and occupational therapy at Children's Hospital, one of the aides met me at the door and said, "I need to tell you what happened at lunch." And she told me. Now, no parent wants to hear that their child has been deprived. Mm-hmm. But when you have paid for the meal, and then someone just arbitrarily decides that a circumstance that is set in stone in the IEP, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
is overlooked, I went full mommy mode. You didn't end up in therapy that day because I went into the office and I raised holy hell.
Mm.
And unfortunately, the principal wasn't there. The vice principal was, and he caught the brunt of it. I left a message for the principal. She called me, and I told her what had happened. And she asked me if I could come to the school the next day, which I did. And I sat down with her. I sat down with the vice principal and told her gave them the explanation that I had been given. And then they called the teacher into the office. And she had absolutely no explanation for it whatsoever.
She didn't say anything?
She said, well, that she should learn. And for me, the offensive thing was the school board person said, well, you need to inform mom how to teach her child to feed herself. Probably not the best thing to tell me, since I'd been taking care of you since you were born and I knew what your limitations were.
Yeah.
So this teacher had to defend her position, and the principal wasn't buying it. And suffice to say that she didn't come back to that school. The teacher didn't come back to that school after that school year. She lost her position in the parish because there had been other instances, not with you, but with other kids. But that was just the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back as far as the principal was concerned.
Yeah.
And by the way, feeding was restored as per the IEP, and you didn't have your arm surgery for several years, and so that practice stayed in place until you were capable of feeding yourself, and mom taught you how to do it.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you had that ability.
I know, right? Yeah.
Okay, so as far as we mentioned, the IEP required that I take one special education class once I got into the regular school, like pre-K, and not pre-K, but kindergarten and first grade and all. So that class was physical education.
Yes.
And it was called adaptive PE.
Right.
Now, I remember the sort of APE that I had in high school, and I remember certain things that I learned how to do, and I think that for me it was beneficial because it helped me to walk farther than I probably would have normally. It helped me to learn how to walk up steps, which I can't do on my own, but if I have a railing, and it has to be a very secure railing,
right,
then I can do that. Obviously, holding someone's hand, I've always been able to do that. But it really did help me in that way.
Fine motor skills were something that really was nice.
Right. And I know that I was looking at one of my IEPs, and the only ones that I could find were from 7th grade. So it wasn't, they weren't the ones that I had when I was in elementary school, when I was learning how to do all of those, elementary type things. Mm-hmm. But in the one from middle school, it stated that I had to walk a specific distance, and, that was outlined as far as what I was currently able to do, and then what the expectation of what I should be able to do by the end of that school year. And then, of course, at the end, it's like, met. You can't really pass or fail it. It's more just like it was met or it wasn't met.
Right.
And then they just do it again next year. So they just pick up where you left off, right, basically. So I remember that. I remember there were a lot of stretches.
Yes.
A lot of stretches.
Loosen you up, limber you up.
Right. And the only reason why I'm talking so much about this instead of asking you about it is because I was there.
Well, yeah.
So did you ever have an issue with me or not really an issue necessarily, but just a concern, I guess, with me taking a PE class? Or was it ever something that you were uncomfortable with, or, you know?
I think that in every step of your life, even today, I'm always leery of new things. Mm-hmm. I always worry because I've seen you fall like a tree with being unable to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. So I've seen you break your nose, and I've seen you break your arm. And so no matter what happens new in your life, even if you're just telling me in retrospect on the phone, I'm concerned always. Adaptive PE was one situation where they would have, in the IEP meeting, they would have the adaptive PE teacher there, and she would lay out what it was that she thought you would be able to accomplish during the year. They were really very careful not to give you overblown goals, so that you could meet the goals and not get discouraged if you couldn't do it, and that kind of thing. And I appreciated that. If you're not living with a person with a disability, particularly a child who you're trying to mold and give them self-esteem and that kind of thing, you might have ideas that this child can do more than what she really could do. They listened to my input. They asked me questions about what you were doing at home and that kind of thing. So the short answer to the long answer to the short question is no. In adaptive PE, I was very pleased every year with the result of the accumulation of skills that you learned. They were really, I think that all kids in your situation should have that as a part of their background.
Okay. Now, I know that there was I did read in the IEP that I have that you did not want the APE class to interfere with the academic classes.
Exactly.
So I shouldn't be taken out of math, for instance, to take...
Yes, that yeah, you bring that up. That was a huge issue.
Yeah. Now, did that happen?
They wanted to take, in 1 year, they wanted to take you out of math class 2 or 3 times a week for adaptive PE. And I put my foot down, as I as I was known to do.
Yeah.
And I said, no. And what that required was that they schedule you around your classes rather than you scheduling around theirs. Mm-hmm. So they would adjust their other schedule with other students that they were seeing, because it wasn't, adaptive PE wasn't necessarily a mass production. They would come and get you and go do your thing. So if you had nap time, for instance, you weren't real big on naps. So nap time, they would come get you during nap time if you were in kindergarten, for instance.
Yeah, I remember once speaking of nap time, just a little thing to add in there. I remember that anytime nap time came around, I just laid there for however long it was. I didn't go to sleep. I can't sleep around all those people.
No, and you did that at home too.
Yeah.
You know, you'd give me you'd have me write down the number on the channels for when, I remember you always loved Webster. So mm-hmm. I wrote down, I had a piece of paper that I would write down the channel and the time, and you would read it and change your channel on your television.
Yeah.
As long as you were in your room and resting for a couple of hours in the afternoon to give me a break, to be honest, then everything was fine. But you watched television or you read or, whatever, you could do. Yeah, but nap time at school, no, that was not a thing.
Yeah, I remember my thing was Webster and Punky Brewster.
Exactly,
yeah.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, so nap time. So they would take me out. You wanted them to take me out during nap time.
Not during a class where you were sitting there in the classroom and there was something academic going on.
Yeah.
If it was tiddlywinks or something like that, then that was fine. But no, I wanted you to be there and not appear to the other students as being taken out. It's particularly when you got past non-CAT where you were going to mainstream school and you weren't in a classroom with it wasn't just all disabled children. It was everybody was in those classrooms. So I didn't want you to be pulled out as something special during a learning period.
Now, and I don't remember this, didn't children in elementary school have PE as well?
Yeah, but it wasn't as often as what the adaptive PE was.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering, why didn't I just take it during that? That's what I did in middle school and high school.
Right. No, adaptive PE was for some reason more often. And they would pull kids out for other special education situations like speech therapy. And they even asked me one time if I wanted you to go to speech therapy rather than adaptive PE, and I said she speaks better than everybody. I don't think that that's going to help her at all. I think it was a joke. But adaptive PE, as I recall, was 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. And I just didn't want you coming out of classes when you should be in the class learning.
Right. Now, I know that at the start of every school year, you would introduce my situation, not really in the young, like the non-CAT, because obviously everybody there was in the same situation I was. But once I started kindergarten, you would introduce me to the students, and tell me about that experience.
Yeah, the first day of school, or the second, I always prearranged it with the principal. But I would go to school, and the main thing that I was concerned about was that at that time, you had, when you were in elementary school, you had we called it an electric wheelchair. It operated by battery and with a joystick and the whole thing. And my main concern was that it would look like a toy. And I didn't want the children in your classes to think that it was a toy, therefore something that they could play with. I wanted them to understand that that was your legs. So I would go to your class and I would explain to them that this was a wheelchair and that it was used because you couldn't bend your arms and legs, and walking for you was a difficult situation and all that. And then I'd have you demonstrate how you got around, and you'd spin around in the classroom and do all that. And then I'd invite each child to come up and touch the chair once. And I'd ask them, don't touch that again. And I get permission from one little kid, and I'd say, can I just put a finger on your knee? And they'd say, yeah. And I said, when I do this on his knee, that's like you touching Lindsay's wheelchair, because that's her legs. And it was, we got a great response from it, and the kids always respected your wheelchair. And when you were in the hallways, I'd watch sometimes. No, I didn't haunt the hallways, but I was there a lot. Picking her up for therapies or whatever it might be. I was at the school enough to see a lot of different situations. And some of them would walk alongside the wheelchair, but they always gave it a wide berth so that you didn't have to worry about running anybody down. And they were very respectful, and all it was just to teach them respect for your chair. And that's why I did it, and I think that it worked, because you didn't ever have any problem with kids messing around with your chair, or thinking, oh man, Lindsay's lucky she's got a toy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, not lucky.
No.
Thankful that I was able to have it, but
yes.
That's what a lot of people don't understand. They always say, like what I mentioned in another episode with my aid tools that I had, like with the hand reachers. Right. Oh, that thing is so cool. It's like, it's only cool to you because you don't need it.
Exactly.
Would I would like to be able to bend down and put on my pants and, put on my own shirt without having to use this thing to put it on? Of course.
Yeah.
People take that for granted.
They sure do. And the one thing that I'd like to point out is that we able-bodied people take for granted everything that we do. And it is a struggle for you particularly, because we're talking about you. It's a struggle for you to actually get up out of bed in the morning. There are so many things that we do that we don't think about. We just do that. Right now I'm talking and I talk with my hands, and I'm waving my hands all around. My hands, I'm holding my hands when I'm not speaking, and my arms are bent. Lindsay said to me one time, she says, Mama, I don't understand how y'all can go walking around with your arms flopping all over everywhere. That's the way she saw us, with our bent arms and the way we move our arms. And I talk with my hands all the time. So yeah, we do take for granted everything. And you in my life, I've learned to take nothing for granted.
You know, I think I'm going to do, in a future episode, I'm going to do a whole episode on taking things for granted.
Oh, no, that's a good one.
You know, what people take for granted because I think that Molly Burke did an episode on that too. What sighted people, she's a blind YouTuber that I watch.
Love her.
Love her. But I think that she did an episode one time on what sighted people take for granted.
I love it.
And sorry about that. That was my phone. But yeah, I think that would be a good topic for another episode.
I think about every morning when I get up out of bed and how easy it is for me. And I've watched you many a morning get up out of your bed, and it's a struggle. And yeah, I think that would be a great episode. I'll be there.
Okay, so I think that we're pretty much coming to a close here, but there's one last topic that I wanted to ask Mom about. There was the kindergarten teacher.
Oh, yes.
Miss Felton.
Yes.
And there was a cute little story behind her and how she became my teacher.
Yes, well, she was adorable, and I absolutely loved her. And her classroom was right next door to Lindsay's non-cat class. And it got toward the end of the school year, and there were 2 or 3, I think there were 3, maybe 2 kindergarten classes in Lindsay's elementary school. And Miss Felton was a gregarious, beautiful lady, and she was outgoing, and she spent a lot of time in the non-cat class for some reason. She just loved the kids, but she gravitated toward Lindsay. So it got to be toward the end of the year, and we're coming up scheduling IEP time and all of this, and Miss Felton announced to the non-cat teacher, announced to the principal, and announced to me that she had dibs on Lindsay. So Lindsay was put in her kindergarten classroom and benefited wonderfully from that lady's teaching and from how loving and kind a woman she was.
Now, I don't really remember too much about those years because they were so long ago, but I do remember that in her class I learned how to spell my name, and which I may have known how to do before, but who knows. I might have learned how to do that non-cat. But I also remember her teaching us how to remember our addresses and our phone numbers and things like that. You know, like the stuff that you need to know for safety purposes.
Yeah.
I remember that, but yeah.
Yeah. She was a great lady.
Yeah.
Shout out to her.
Yes, shout out to her. Okay, well, I think that's it. I think that's all we have today. It's been good.
Oh, I love it.
Now, if anyone has any questions or if you have any comments or anything, I welcome you to tweet at me at Oh My Scars Pod. And you can also go on my Tumblr where I post these podcasts as well. You can comment on there if you have any questions, and it's the same as
page.
Yes. The Tumblr is the same as the Twitter, Oh My Scars Pod. And then on Facebook at Oh My Scars, we have a like page on there. And you can go there and comment and do whatever your heart fancies.
That's right.
All right, so I wanted to thank you all for listening today and for having my mom here today. And I love you so much.
I love you, and audience, you are fortunate to be getting to know Lindsay. She's really an inspiration. She truly is.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you. All right, so I'll see you all next time, and I hope you have an awesome day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.